When you imagine war, you probably picture tanks, soldiers, and falling bombs. But what if I told you the deadliest battles in history weren't fought with weapons? They were silent. No marching armies, no smoking ruins, just currencies collapsing, and entire nations crumbling from the inside. These are currency wars, and once you learn to recognize them, you'll see that money has shaped the fate of empires just as powerfully as any sword or cannon. This isn't just economics, it's about power. Currency wars decide who rises and who falls, whose wealth survives and whose vanishes. And the terrifying part? They're happening right now, quietly, invisibly, affecting the value of every dollar, euro, or yen in your pocket. The logic behind a currency war is brutally simple. Use money as a weapon. You can devalue your own currency to make your country's products cheap and dominate global trade. You can manipulate interest rates to crush your competitors. You can print money until your rivals choke on inflation. Or you can hoard gold so tightly that the rest of the world has no choice but to follow your rules. On paper, it looks like smart strategy. In reality, it's economic warfare that often spirals into chaos, damaging both sides, and sometimes destroying the attacker as much as the target. One of the earliest modern examples erupted during the Great Depression. After the stock market crash of 1929, nations were desperate to save their economies. Instead of working together, they turned on each other, slashing the value of their currencies in a race to the bottom. Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931. The United States followed, devaluing the dollar. Japan, France, Italy, everyone joined in. But this didn't lead to recovery. It led to financial bloodshed. Global trade ground to a halt, and resentment built up like dry tinder waiting for a spark. That spark would eventually ignite World War II. But this was hardly humanity's first currency war. Ancient Rome waged its own version nearly 2,000 years earlier. The backbone of its empire was the silver denarius, a coin trusted and respected across the known world. But as the empire expanded, the costs of war exploded. Instead of raising taxes, Roman emperors took a shortcut. They started diluting the silver in their coins, mixing in cheaper metals like copper. At first, no one noticed. But over time, the denarius went from nearly pure silver to containing barely 5%. This was ancient quantitative easing, and it had predictable results. Runaway inflation, a collapse in public trust, and a weakened empire vulnerable to chaos. The barbarians at the gates didn't defeat Rome alone. Rome crippled itself from within long before they arrived. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the battlefield of money evolved again. After World War II, global leaders created the Bretton Woods system. Most of the world's currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. This wasn't just an economic agreement. It was a masterstroke of geopolitical power. By controlling the dollar, the United States controlled the world's financial system. If a nation stepped out of line, it could be punished financially, without a single shot being fired. It was quiet, clean, and incredibly effective. But this power came at a cost. By the late 1960s, the US was printing more dollars than it could back with gold, mostly to fund the Vietnam War and expensive social programs. Other countries noticed the imbalance and started demanding gold for their dollars, as was their right. The US was facing a monetary crisis. So, in 1971, President Nixon made a stunning move that detonated the global financial system. He severed the dollar's link to gold, killing the Bretton Woods system overnight. This began the era of floating exchange rates, and with it, a new, more volatile age of currency warfare. One of the most devastating examples of this new warfare came in 1985. Japan's economy was booming, its exports flooding global markets. The US and Europe saw this as an economic threat. So they met at the Plaza Hotel in New York and engineered a coordinated strike, forcing the value of the Japanese yen to skyrocket. The result? Japanese exports became painfully expensive. A massive speculative bubble formed in Japan's economy, and when it burst, the country fell into decades of economic stagnation. No missiles were fired, no troops were deployed, just currencies, used like precision-guided weapons to neutralize a competitor. Currency wars don't look like wars while they're happening. They look like interest rate announcements, policy changes, and press conferences. But behind those sterile words are very real casualties. Factory workers losing their jobs, families losing their savings, and entire economies being pushed to the brink. The 1997 Asian financial crisis made this brutally clear. It started when Thailand's currency collapsed. Then Indonesia, South Korea, and Malaysia followed in a domino effect. Life savings vanished. Businesses shut down. Millions of people were thrown into poverty almost overnight. One nation's currency maneuver had triggered a regional economic disaster. And what about now? We're living in what some economists call Currency War 4.0. Today's battles aren't fought with gold or silver, they're fought with near-zero interest rates, massive money printing known as quantitative easing, and financial sanctions that can freeze an entire country's economy. The US and China are locked in a monetary chess match where every move reshapes global finance. China is stockpiling gold and building alternative payment networks to challenge the dollar. The US is using its control over the global financial system to maintain its dominance. Then came 2020. In response to the pandemic, governments around the world printed money at levels that were once unthinkable. Trillions of dollars created in just months. At first, this seemed to work. Markets soared and economies stabilized. But inflation doesn't strike instantly. It creeps in like smoke under a door. By 2022, inflation hit highs not seen in decades. The US Federal Reserve responded with aggressive interest rate hikes. This strengthened the dollar, sending shockwaves through the rest of the world. Nations with debt denominated in dollars suddenly found themselves in a crisis. This is the invisible cruelty of currency wars. One country's solution becomes another country's catastrophe. History shows that currency wars rarely end neatly. They continue until something breaks. A currency collapses, a system resets, or a new monetary order emerges. The Dutch guilder ruled global trade in the 1600s. Then it was the British pound in the 1800s. For the last century, it's been the US dollar. Each of those transitions was chaotic. And now, people are whispering, what comes after the dollar? A world with multiple reserve currencies? Digital currencies issued by central banks? Or something entirely new, like decentralized systems no government can control? These aren't just academic questions. They directly impact the price of your food, the security of your savings, and the direction of your future. The most dangerous thing about a currency war is that most people don't even know they're in one. When a bomb explodes, you hear it. But when your currency quietly loses 20% of its value, you only notice when groceries cost more and your rent becomes unaffordable. By the time it's headline news, the damage is already done. That's why understanding these patterns is so important. Money isn't neutral. It's a tool of power, a weapon, and you're on the battlefield whether you realize it or not. History doesn't repeat itself, but its warnings echo through time. Rome debased its currencies straight into collapse. The 1930s drowned in competitive devaluations. The Plaza Accord reshaped Japan's destiny. Quantitative easing has reshaped our 21st century. The tools change, but the playbook remains the same. If you want to navigate a currency war, you can't just rely on the system. You need to understand it. You need real awareness. Because when governments turn money into a weapon, the safest place to stand is where they can't aim at you. If this gave you a new perspective on money and power, hit that subscribe button. History holds the answers, and I'll keep showing you where to look. Thanks for watching.